So this is an overview of the project, and I thought this would be appropriate. And I just want to point out too, and I'm sure you'll all agree, and I've traveled across Canada, I've been in many First Nations, but it's my opinion that Listigouche is one of the most progressive and prosperous First Nations in the country. One might say, well, there's Member 2, you know, there's the place out there where they, I forget his name, Chief Louis, et cetera, but the price they've had to pay for that prosperity in many instances is, well, they've lost their language. Yes, they've got big businesses and everything, but so this is what we're trying to avoid. We want to be prosperous, but we don't want to do it at the expense of compromising and losing our language. So I just thought that there was a nice view of what I consider to be a healthy community that is still working on becoming healthier, and I feel we're on our way. This slide here, basically what it symbolizes is we see the Indian Act in the back, the writing, the white paper, etc. That's what's been governing us for over 100 years. Then now what we see is this, you could call it a wampum belt or beading, and we're slowly taking over the Indian Act, where it's going to fade further and further into the background until we become the people that control our own Listigouche education. So that's something we're looking toward. This other piece here is quite important because it demonstrates what's going on right now in Listigouche. The number one piece at the top, that is the Listigouche Education Directorate. It's one of three. The other item, the number 2 box, shows you the LMD, the Listigouche Mi'kmaq Development Council, and then we have the First Nation Regional Adult Education Center, which are all working in separate silos, and that's not healthy, that's not good. We're not going to achieve regaining our language, we're not going to achieve education governance if we continue to operate under these silos. So this is the existing structure right now. What we're looking at over the period of time is coming together and coming up with a single education governance structure. In other words, bring all those various structures together, programs, bring them in as one, and it seems to me that only then can we begin our journey to where we need to go, and that is to recover our identity. Another piece of the process is the indigenization of curriculum. Now, some people say, oh my goodness, indigenization, what are they going to do? You know, are they going to take away math, science, history, all those things? Not really. Indigenization of our curriculum, first of all, doesn't happen overnight. That's a long process. And what it basically means is taking our curriculum and making it look like us, making it relevant to who we are as Mi'kmaq. Because for the most part, I know those of you that are here in my age, I certainly had no idea when we were going to school what being Mi'kmaq was. All I knew was shame. Shame. We were ashamed. We were made to feel ashamed. And we don't want that for our children. We want them to feel proud of who they are. So the indigenization of curriculum is an ongoing process. It's happening as we speak. And you saw that when you saw the students that are basically learning from the land. They learn more from the land in some instances than they do in a classroom. And so we want to start making that happen in as natural a way as possible. It's been, research has demonstrated that you can teach science, you can teach math, you can teach history. There's so many subjects that are isolated into a classroom that are better taught in the environment. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that going on. And I think our children are fortunate, and we as a community are fortunate that we are saying, you know, that's what we're comfortable with right now. But the mainstream curriculum, if you will never be downgraded or minimized. If anything, I think this is going to enhance our children's education quite extensively. Now, the section on listed education standards, what that means is that right now we operate under provincial standards, whether it's Quebec or New Brunswick. For example, I guess a good example of the need for us to create our own standards is just language, introducing our language into the classroom. If you went under the Quebec curriculum, they would say, no, you either extend your day or because there's just no time within their curriculum for us to do that. So what we're basically saying is we will develop our own standards. We'll determine what's in the best interest of our children, not Quebec, not New Brunswick. And in doing so, the community will be consulted on a regular basis because these are big steps that we're taking here. And it's going to take some time. So standards could even be something, I was just thinking about another, a holiday, for example. You know, we might decide we want to make, and I'm not even sure if it is right now, if Aboriginal Solidarity Day is a holiday. So, you know, we might come up with other holidays where we want to celebrate who we are. Culture days, for example, those belong to us, and you could not do that in a mainstream school. So this school, Alaqsite'w Gitpu, has over the decade, I believe we said 20 years, somebody said 1997, it's come a long way in indigenizing the curriculum, and it's been so natural that you really don't feel it. It's natural, and now we're just accustomed to the way things are done here at Alaqsite'w Gitpu. Prioritize and protect. Obviously, that speaks for itself. But this is exactly what we're trying to do. Is we want to prioritize our Mi'kmaq and our Mi'kmaq language immersion. Those are key pieces that we have to protect. We need to protect the listed education system, again, because we don't want, I guess, other systems imposed on us. So we need to continue working on this. And this is an example here. When you see young people like this, and in this instance, many are parents wanting to learn the Mi'kmaq language so that they can talk to their children who themselves are in Mi'kmaq immersion. So there's been a really big move, I guess, toward regaining the language. This here, I guess, it's community members, but at the same time, it's an example of how we should be getting together to form our own education law. And this has been done, as I mentioned earlier. Other communities throughout Canada, the Nisga'a in British Columbia, the Inuit, and the other one that I mentioned earlier, the Anishinaabe, they have created their own education acts or agreements or laws. And that's what we're going to be looking into. We're going to be looking into how did they do it? How did they get to where they are? We're going to be looking at other communities throughout the country, First Nation, and saying, where are you in your process toward getting your own education laws? So there's a lot that's going on out there, but we have what we're going to be doing is looking for all that information, and we're going to gather that information and bring it to the community and to the people that are directly involved in education. So it's our view that the benefits to Listigujawah under this education agreement that we're looking at, and especially bringing together those three programs that are now operating separately, the benefits to bringing all of that together would help children, ourselves, it would improve our self-esteem, it would remove shame, and people might think, I've heard people say, well, I don't feel shame, about being Ulnu. Well, we do. Deep down, there will always be that sense of shame. What we don't want is for our children to ever feel that sense of shame. So we expect that with these changes that we would get more participation, enrollment, more graduates, and all those items that are listed there before you. And of course, at the end of the day, it has a lot to do with reducing social problems and expanding jurisdiction. It's all over the place. There's so much that comes out of that. So it's not just about the individual benefiting; it's the community that will benefit. So basically, phase one, this is phase one, as I said, of 3. And right now, that process would have started, I believe, in mid-April. And then we're going to go on until about the end of August. And this phase is mainly to do with setting up a plan. How are we going to get where we're going? So it's the development of a project plan to have a single governance structure in place, inclusive of Listage law in education and an education authority. That's what we're looking at. And our objective during phase one is to conduct community engagement to discuss the development and the implementation of a single governance structure for education, training, and employment. And again, as I noted in terms of the timeline, that we plan to complete that by the 31st of August. So some of the activities that are included in our project right now is the analysis of current First Nation education systems in Canada. And as I indicated, we know that there are 3 that have ratified their acts, and so we'll be looking closely to them. We also plan to have numerous meetings with Listage on how you want to be engaged in the discussion on a single governance structure for education. We're open to large group meetings, small group meetings. This is sort of the launch, if you will, of phase one. And what you're looking at now is not been seen by anyone. So the video itself, the PowerPoint presentation, all this is new. And once we complete this, and with the support of the leadership and the community, then we plan to go further. In fact, for example, we're going to be meeting with the educators and all the people that work at Listage Education Directorate, LMDC, here at Alaqsite'w Gitpu. We'll have a session like this for them. And I guess the question that we have to you, and you'll see my contact information after this, is do you have any other suggestions as to how we can ensure that the community is engaged in this phase, in phase 2, and in phase 3? Because as Lorna said on one of the previous videos, this cannot be a top down. It's got to come from the community, and you're very welcome to come in and give us suggestions on how you see this process happening. So we're going to be compiling written questions. We're going to be sending out a survey within the next, I'm hoping within the next month. We are also going to be putting together a radio talk show, and that's going to be broadcast, I believe, sometimes in early June. We're hoping for early June. And that broadcast, or that radio show, will have Lorna, Darcy, myself, Dr. Fred, whoever is interested in sitting down and talking about this. So we have a lot of engaging to do with the community, and we plan to do that from here on in. So basically, the last thing again is compiling written responses. And then we're going to take that information and submit the materials to inform and guide the development of the project plan itself. So I guess that's it in a nutshell. I'm not saying I don't think it's part of the process to take in questions right now. If you have any, and if I can answer, I certainly will. But more than anything, it was to provide you with an overview of what it is that's being looked at right now. So I believe the last slide that's me, Sandra Germain, 461-8525. There is my email address. So if anybody needs to call me, or if anybody wants to send an email to me, if you have any ideas, any suggestions, any criticisms, if you feel that maybe we're not on the right track, that we're missing something, by all means, you're welcome to call me or to send me an email. All right, Valalio. Okay, the Gmail is sgermain.listaguch@gmail.com. Malalio.
Okay, thank you very much, Sandra. Very nice presentation, and I look forward to the work that comes out of phase one. And you know, out of there, hopefully we'll get a nice plan and how we can develop how to then go into phase two and develop that governance structure for Listuguj, so that we can continue to build I guess our governance and control over our own education in our own community. Next on our agenda, we have Sky Metallic to update on capital projects.
Good evening. Just some of the projects that we have recently completed on the capital side. As John Alexander mentioned earlier, we have the band garage that is just wrapping up. We have another project is the JRM rink roof that is just wrapping up. We should be able to be using that the rink to its full capacity sometime later this summer. I believe we have a splash pad this year that should be used to by the end of the summer for the youth. We have a youth center expansion, and we are also looking at expanding that building sometime this year. The AGS expansion, this school, we're looking probably between 2018, 2019, as far as construction goes. Also another project for this year would be Micmac Drive, total resurfacing of the road. Installing installing some drainage. This year, we already initiated the Capeland Road project. We are beyond the basic concept. We are getting the preliminary plans ready for this year. That's happening as we speak. Capeland Road will consist of just totally redoing the whole road with asphalt, proper drainage. The proper drainage will be able to fix the flooding problems that some of the houses have on the road. We're looking at final plans by maybe towards the end of the summer. Big bid documents probably by this November, and maybe we could have some shovels in the ground by next May. Capital has also been working on a housing policy. We have initiated an outside consultant to help tailor housing policy to accommodate the many different needs of our community members. So it's not just sort of like a one shoe that fits all. It's going to be tailored for individual needs. And that's in a nutshell of what's going on capital and infrastructure side.
That's awesome to hear all those things in the works. But I didn't hear the GIGNU. What is the status on the new GIGNU that's been sitting there, completed, not completed? Are they moving in anytime soon, or what are the plans for that?
That's up to the director. Maybe someone else could speak on the director's behalf.
So I don't have the most detailed or the most up-to-date information, but I can tell you as of last week, maybe it's changed since last week, there was just some minor tweaks with the ventilation system that needed to be worked out, but other than that, the building is ready to go. And there should be a plan, hopefully, to move into that building quite soon. maybe even Dolly knows more than I do. I don't know, but it has come a long way, and it's just a few little minor things. We have signed a new service contract with Centre Jeunesse that should bring us for the next 2 years towards a point where we continue to assume more control over that operation as well. So,
Do you have any plans with the building, the old Gignu?
there's been some things thrown out as ideas. One project that I don't know if you want me to elaborate on that, Cathy, Shiela. We had talked about different uses of it. We did put in a proposal to use it as I guess a homeless shelter, transition home type of emergency shelter, I guess, if you will. Unfortunately, the proposal wasn't accepted. But again, we continue to throw around ideas of how we can use that home. Mind you, it will need extensive work before it can be used for anything.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I'll pass it back over to Lorna to update on something.
I just wanted to give a little bit more detail on the expansion project. It's pretty exciting for us. We had submitted the proposal in 2015 in December, I think, so it's been about a year and a half. We've been waiting for some answers, so we did have a little bit more work to do. But just to give you an idea of what's going to be happening in the school is that this space itself is going to be expanded. We're going to see bleachers for obviously for watching games and so forth. This wall won't be here. It's going to move into, I guess, a stage area, and behind that stage area, there's going to be our cafeteria, which is really exciting. After that space is going to be our brand new wing, and that wing is going to house the Mi'kmaq Immersion Program. I'm sure that you're aware we moved the Mi'kmaq Immersion Program temporarily to the education complex, and that move was part of the strategy to save the language. When the children were here, there was too much other languages heard, so to have a real, true immersion program, we needed to move it. So once we get the wing built, the immersion program is going to move back, and it's going to be an immersion, Mi'kmaq only space within the school. So just want to give you a little bit more detail on that project.
Any further questions on the capital projects or anything before we move on?
Sherry.
Oh, Sherry? Just hold on, Sherry.
To Lorna, with the extension of a cafeteria, is there going to be a cafeteria, like a real cafeteria set up like while we went to school? You line up, you get your tray and your food, and will that be run within our own community members that will be doing the cooking instead of processing it out into outsourcing it? Sorry.
So what you're talking about, the noonday lunch program? Well, that program, there's going to be activity even before the cafeteria is built. But yes, to answer your first question, it's going to be a cafeteria. Yes, line up, choose your food, just like when we were in school. As far as the noonday lunch program itself, what we're working on right now is putting together, with the help of the health sector, a request for proposals that'll go out for bidding on that. So if there are community members that want to bid on that service, or to provide the service to our children, then that'll be open to them.
When does this project start?
Just see a hand shooting up in the back. So right now we're in there's still a couple of boxes to check off before we can get started, but we're hoping that construction will start about this time next year.
Cool, thank you.
And it is a significant project. We're looking at about $7.7 million. Yep.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more regarding the splash pad, the youth center expansion. Along with that, we did get some funding from federal government regarding those projects. So the youth center, we're looking at an expansion towards the back, so it's going to go out and up, so there'll be a second floor. On the main floor, there will be an extended gym area for our youth with all new equipment, as well as space for our youth, you know, to run around, to have more games, more indoor sports. Upstairs, there will be a craft room, a culture room, and to the side, towards the west, there will be office space. So there we'll house our recreation coordinator and other services there. We're hoping to break ground on that project the end of June. In fact, our architects will be here next week with the plans. The splash pad, you know, many of you have probably brought your children or grandchildren to the splash pad in Camelton. We are going to have our own here, and it will be right next door to the current playground. But in between that, there will be a section of outdoor fitness equipment for adults. So while you're there with your kids, you can hop on some equipment there. So and all of these projects have already been approved. As well as our trails, we have about 32 kilometers of trails towards, I don't know what area would that be, Bustede, the former Bustede area, the Mine Road, beyond the towers. So last season, before winter, the forestry crew had gone up there and they've widened the trails. So we have beautiful trails. We access them in the winter with snowshoes, and in the summertime, if people want to hike, they'll be able to go up that way. The trails have been identified. There's a couple of billboards up there, so I tell people you can't get lost. If you feel that you would, just go up into the highest mountain, see the river, and you know that home is just down that hill. So these are exciting projects for us, and it's about, these projects are about promoting healthy lifestyles among our youth and families as well. So they're not just geared specifically for our youth, but to engage families as well.
So if there's no other questions, I'll pass the mic over to Dr. Cathy Martin, Chief Counselor, to update us on a session that you went to, right?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'd just like to give you an update, an overview of some of the cross-border issues that we're facing as Canadians entering into the United States in light of all the new changes to security and passports and different things like that. On April 19th, I attended a Chiefs meeting at the AFNQL level to discuss border crossing issues. Coincidentally, the minister had gave us a special representative to address these issues, and his name was Mr. Fred Caron. And Mr. Caron, coincidentally, after he spoke, he said he knew where Listigouche was, and he lives in Ottawa, and he's from Ottawa now, but he grew up in Point Lenim, so it's a small world. He just lives down the road, and he was excited to hear that Listigouche still exists, yes. So he kind of knew us, so that was interesting. So what we did, we sat around and we identified a lot of the issues facing Canadians when they cross the border, and a lot of the changes that are affecting us in light of the Jay Treaty that we have. There is a concern with the Jay Treaty. The Jay Treaty was a treaty that was established in order to give us access to and from the United States. And the Jay Treaty states it is designed for tribes that are on both sides of the border. At some point it got extended to all of First Nations, but there are only certain tribes that are on both sides of the border. We as Mi'kmaq, we're okay because we have Mi'kmaq in the Atlantic provinces, our area. There are also some Mi'kmaq in Maine. So we do fall into that category, but it is a concern for other First Nations in the country where their tribe is not near a border, and sometimes they're facing issues with that cross-border crossing. So that was one of the issues that was identified. Another issue that was identified was in particular to the Swasson Reserve, because that encompasses, if you don't know, it encompasses 3 territories. There's Swasson Reserve is situated in Quebec, Ontario, and in the United States. So they have their own border that they can use, but also when they cross in the other borders, in the Service Canada borders, that they face a lot of delays, a lot of issues, things. They also have developed a lot of exciting strategies that I want to share with you later, because perhaps we can do similar things here. So, but that came up as a concern. Another national concern is the requirement at one point of a 50% blood quantum letter to cross the border. As it states now, they are no longer being accepted, or they're not supposed to be accepted to cross the border with this 50% blood quantum. The chiefs apparently were dictated that they are no longer given authority to sign these letters, and that identification has to come from INAC. Well, there's a problem there, because INAC, who issues band cards or First Nation status cards, they don't go by bloodline. So there's a mismatch. So they're asking for blood quantum to cross the border, but yet INAC is issuing status cards to people that don't have any blood quantum. So there are some issues being faced at the border there, which are being looked at seriously. Just crossing of the border, there's a huge inconsistencies with the border agents. A lot of the border agents along this country are not familiar with our right to cross over into and come back. So there's a lot of issues and delays with that. And so the education level, not the education level, but the information level of the border agent is, they're different. They vary from maybe a senior one to a young one. They're not all on this, they don't all have the same information. Oh, here's one that's really of interest. Currently, when we look at different aspects of crossing the border, in most circumstances, we are still considered immigrants in Canada. When you're trying to apply for any kind of passport status or a student loan status or any kind of different status, we are considered in the immigrant section, which is really insulting to us as First Nation people. The AFN is looking at that very seriously, because we are not immigrants in our own country, but that is a cross-border issue. Identity problems that have stemmed from crossing the border. We have a lot of seniors. We have some in this community, and there's a lot in Odanak and a few in Akwesasne, where they are being denied some pension benefits. The reason they're being denied pension benefits is because they are not considered Canadian citizens, because when they cross the border in infancy, at the time a mother would be carrying her infant across the border, and they didn't have, they just took the baby, they didn't identify it or put a point of landing, they call it, a green card point of landing strip. So you have a group of First Nation people in this country that are not considered as Canadian because they were born in the States and probably just carried across or whatever. So it didn't affect them their whole life because their community knew they were First Nation. But when it's coming to the time when they're getting pension now, they're coming into a lot of difficulties with that. There is a suggested solution. I'll get to that later. So there is an identity problem issue from border crossing. Hunting issues. A lot of times First Nation people are experiencing difficulty transporting their game, their wild game, across the border with the restrictions of what can be brought across the border. And not only wild game, but also things of cultural value, such as an eagle feather. There's issues crossing borders with different, cultural items. So, there's no sensitivity there at the border. They've been revoked from some people. They've been confiscated. No respect has been given in relation to these cultural items that our First Nation people carry with them crossing the border. So there's quite a few issues that have been crossed there. Another issue is paying duty on the items. Within the Jay Treaty, there is a statement saying that we are allowed to cross the border with our household goods, our food, which would include clothing, food, vehicles, they're for household use, furniture. A lot of us go shop in the States, we are subject to duty when we cross the border. There have been different ways that the Akwesasne community has dealt with that, and another Mohawk community, I'm not sure which one, and they have made memorandum of understanding with their communities and the local borders, so that there is a memorandum of understanding that these goods can be transferred without paying the duty. I don't know their process. We can research that if we would choose to do this as a community. Meanwhile, at the AFN level, there's legislative framework by Canada that is being worked on to ensure that this is for all First Nations, that it's standard. But there are some communities that do benefit from this memorandum of understanding between Canada and the United States. And I'm just going to go back to the Jay Treaty. The problem with the Jay Treaty is it is a piece of, it is a treaty, but that treaty in the United States has been slid into, if you will, into policy and procedure for security purposes. So the danger of having a treaty being reduced to a policy is a policy can be changed. A policy can be changed at a stroke of a pen by political leaders, and not necessarily with the consent of the First Nation people. So that is a danger. That is something that is being looked at as well. That's very serious, because in light of the current American administration, we have to be cautious of what powers can just say, well, we no longer accept this treaty. To date, America has been very accepting of the Jay Treaty. It is Canada that doesn't fully accept the Jay Treaty. So there's a clause in the Jay Treaty that Canada has not yet fully accepted, and somewhere in my notes, but I know the section in some of my other notes that they're not quite comfortable with yet. So it is being looked at. So some of the solutions that we discussed was to start, and this is the AFN has delegated a special person, a special assignment to a former chief, Mike Mitchell, an Akwesasne, I don't know if he's Akwesasne, I know he's Mohawk. He's Akwesasne, yes. And he is he's in charge of this cross-border file. And what Mr. Mitchell is working on is actually building, because no one has ever sat down with First Nation people, Canada, and the United States to discuss this issue. So this is his job, to get these three powers at B to sit down and discuss these issues so that they could rectify a lot of the problems that we're facing. One of the primary things that they're working on is, of course, with passports and transporting back and forth, they're working on an Indigenous card that would serve as that would recognize our Indigenous rights as First Nation people, but also recognize our inherited rights, that we could transport our game, and our treaty rights, and our security rights. There's 4 rights that need to be recognized with this Indigenous card. So this is what they're working on with the countries, with our First Nations, and Canada and the United States. Positive things are happening. The countries, Canada, United States, and the AFN, they are meeting, they are talking, and that's a positive step, because at least discussions are being held at this point. Some meantime solutions for those older individuals that are experiencing difficulty getting their pension because they're having difficulty confirming their identity as a First Nation person or a dual residency-ship that we have. Part of the solution, if you know anyone who falls in that category, is you begin with an OIC from your community. Say, for example, we know that Mary Jo or whatever grew up her whole life, we know her parents, we know her relatives. We can say that, yes, this individual is a Listugush Mi'kmaq First Nation. You can start with an OIC, and the government that issues pension, I have the contact person here, will help you in accepting that OIC and help that person become identified as a Canadian citizen, 65 years after they've crossed the border as an infant, so to speak. And I know there's at least one case, one woman has approached me and had asked for help with that. So it does exist, and so if you know anybody else, feel free to refer them. So I'm just looking at other notes in there. Okay, I think I got them all. So do you have any questions in regards to anything I could probably remember if it was discussed? I could, yes?
Okay, my question is, those of us that carry an American passport, sometimes we're asked to produce a residency card. Has that ever been discussed at that level?
Yes, it is being discussed. The residency card or the green card has been discussed. In particular, some of the First Nations refuse to get a passport because the passport says that you are a citizen of Canada. They respect themselves as a citizen of their nation, whether that be a Mohawk nation, a Mi'kmaq nation. So what they're working on with the countries is that, especially with Canada, is on the passport to have a disclaimer that, yes, we will accept to use your passport, but you recognize us as a blank nation, like as a Mi'kmaq nation, Mi'kmaq First Nation, or Mohawk First Nation, or whatever kind of Cree First Nation you are. So you're recognizing we're keeping our autonomy, that we are within our own nations, but we're accepting to use their form of transportation. But it was brought up with these residency cards. In particular, the Mohawks of Ganawagi have a hard time because they live, a lot of them, in New York and in Ganawagi. They own vehicles. They have trouble transporting their vehicles across. They have trouble with taxation. They have a lot of trouble with all these dual residencies, because are you a resident of the States or are you a resident of Canada? So yeah, that residency card issue did come up, and they're trying to rectify that with an Indigenous card that would have your Indigenous rights, your security rights, your treaty rights, and your inherited rights. Yeah. So that's was discussed. Any other questions?
There was a question from a community member online asking who was in charge of the J Treaty. You had mentioned that earlier.
I'm not sure who was in charge of the J Treaty. The J Treaty is quite old. I don't have the date right now. I don't have that information on me. It's a historical document. I think we could. It's a discussions. It's a what? The discussions you're talking about, Mike Mitchell? Yeah. Oh, Mike Mitchell. Mike Mitchell would have information on that, but I don't personally know yeah, Mike Mitchell from the AFN. He's appointed by the Assembly of First Nation, and he's the one working on that. But the J Treaty specifics, I don't have them with me. Yeah. 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 He's well versed on that. So are there any other questions online? Sherry?
I just want to know what's the difference between that card you just proposed to us or brought it out there regarding our new status cards. Like why can't those things be put on the new status cards that we did get from Ottawa that look like friggin' little, you know, your little things are on it?
I do have an answer for that. The new cards that we have, the AFN cards, they recognize our Indigenous rights, our inherited rights, our treaty rights, and our security rights. A lot of times we as First Nations, a lot of communities have their own membership codes, and their membership codes are based most likely on inheritance or bloodline, or however they choose to accept their membership. INAC has their own set of rules. So this would eliminate INAC's set of rules and for the country, and we would have an Indigenous card which would recognize us as Indigenous people and our inherited rights, and so we would need that card rather than the band status card to cross the border, because it, yes? They would probably still accept band cards, but they're trying to go universal, and the band cards are useful for other pieces of ID, but they're really trying to go towards that one card that will encompass it all. You may still need your band card for tax exempt or whatever, but they're trying to get that in place of even a passport. So, but they're working with the countries and the airlines. It's a big process. So. Well, it's already started. Mr. Mike Mitchell is already on a special committee. They have a table of chiefs that works on that. And you could look him up and contact him on the AFN. He's a special assignment worker, and he is working on that. He's already organized meetings. He has all the information. You know, it's not going to happen tomorrow, because when you're meeting with countries and different things and negotiations haven't started yet. It's just a preliminary meetings, and it takes years when you're dealing with high officials in different countries. So, but invite him to listen to us? We could. Should we? Could. He would know a lot more. I'll send him out an email and we'll try to get him. Yes?
Hang on.
Anybody replacing Gino? Which way? I don't even know how to use them. I thought my mouth was loud enough. Anybody replacing Gino Clement yet? Or do you have anybody in place, or is he coming back, or what's going on there?
So I guess the most I can tell you at this point, I mean, Gino's situation is Gino's situation, but we do have Jennifer Wysote that's been hired on as a assistant land manager, and so she's in there taking care of some of those files. If you do need any assistance, any help with land transfers, lands and questions in general, things like that, Jennifer can help you out. If it's regarding membership, that would be Tina Barnaby. Jennifer was out, yeah. So Jennifer isn't in the office, I think, this week, but she'll be back next week or the week after. So we do have people doing work in there, but Gino himself is not back right now.
Cathy, are there any other First Nations that have already in the same situation we are, where we have First Nation communities across the border in USA? I know Mohawks do, right?
Yes.
Are there any other nations, you know, that have that communities that they share in Canada and the United States?
Yes, there's a lot up north in the Alaska area, Yukon. There's a lot of tribes up there. There's a lot along the borders of lower Edmonton and the prairies and all that. There's a lot of tribes along the borders that benefit from that. And,
are there any other First Nations that are protected or that are part of this Jay Treaty besides the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet?
Are there any other
other nations that fall under that Jay Treaty?
Yes, the Jay Treaty even encompasses Mexico tribes in southern states, like as long as they're like across the border, depending like they're supposed to be on both sides of the border. But right now the Jay Treaty is respected as all First Nations. So I can't think of a tribe now, but if you have a, say, like a Blackfoot tribe way up in northern Alberta, where it's nowhere near a border, and they want to cross, they're still with the band status card and whatever, usually permitted to cross under that treaty.
I know here locally, I mean, you are able to continue to pass with your band card.
Yes.
I have an American passport simply because I was born in the U.S. before we moved here. Myself, I wanted to travel, so I took advantage and I got myself a passport. I didn't want to go through the trouble, and I didn't want to swear allegiance to Canada, so I said I'll give status quo.
Yeah.
When I come back across the border, I now have to present my band card, so I always have to have it on me, you know, because they want to know, as an American, you have American passport, what are you doing here, you know? Mm-hmm. So I show them my status card, and that works for me. Yes. The only thing I would have, I do have problems with, and I'm sure everybody else, I've heard of people who went to the States to purchase cabinets, and they were hit with a humongous bill, taxes, you know, right. 3-4 years later. I just came from there this last week, and I paid $4.70 some in taxes at Walmart. They did their calculations and said I owed them close to $7. They you know, took that money I paid in taxes and put it in American dollars. So I ended up paying $7 Canadian. I mean, these are issues that we're facing. I assume there's other community members that face much more. but these are issues that we're facing. Is there any plan? I know Mike Mitchell. I've heard, I've known him and I've heard of him over the years. Are they going to be looking at issues specific to people who are part of this J Treaty, or are they going to be looking across the board?
I believe they're looking across the board, but I'm just saying that we're fortunate because it is not totally our decision. We cannot control what the United States decides. We can't control what Canada decides. We can barely control what we as First Nations together decide. So it is being looked at as global. Yes, when we cross the border, we're supposed to be only paying 5% of our, duty because it is a Quebec tax, not a New Brunswick tax. But even at that, there are other communities that have developed a memorandum of understanding with the, say we're close to Maine, we would have that with the Maine border people, and that we could cross our goods. And our goods do include clothes, and they do include cabinets, if you will, or furniture, and then this is what they were saying. It's respected in other areas close to Odenak and Akwesasne, where they're allowed to bring their goods across duty-free because it's stated so in the J Treaty. It's just... could you ask the question in the mic? I kind of heard half of it. Mike,
yeah, I'm just asking if the chief and council here, because it affects community members here in Listuguj, if the chief and council will be forwarding any sort of document to the borders near this community, Fort Fairfield, Presque Isle, even up to, I believe, Woodstock, because our people do cross a lot there. Will they be informing, the border crossing, that we have, we're supposed to be able to, bring furniture and clothing, without being taxed that much? Because if you look at, I paid at Walmart close to $5 and I paid them close to $7. So I mean, that's a big chunk of tax. I mean, that's 100% plus, I don't know how to calculate. I'll let Lorna do that. But, it's a big chunk of change.
Yeah.
If I went to get something, if I were taxed $300 for my cabinets, what am I going to pay? That's something that hits our home and our people, especially people building homes,
Yep. I agree. I think the first part of that process is to get the process that has already been established by the other communities, so we could follow suit, because it's nothing new. It's something that's already established. So if we can locate those, and perhaps Mr. Mike Mitchell could help us to locate those MOUs. Once we have the process that they went through, we could do a similar process here. I think that would be the first step. And then it's more than just informing the United States that we have this. It's kind of almost like asking or negotiating that, can you accept this? That's how it's been at each of the borders, because there's been a lot of nation-to-nation discussion. Yeah, we could tell them that this is the way it is, but we have no control of if they accept it or not. We can't control the United States government, and that was one of the issues. Yes, and again, Canada is not accepting a certain part of the J Treaty. So this is part of the negotiation that Mr. Mitchell is on, is having Canada to accept that Section 31, whatever, I have it written in my other notes, to accept that, to fully accept the J Treaty. But I think that is a process that's worth looking into, just to get a hold of the process of how it's done in other border communities, so we don't have to pay those duties. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll now pass the mic over to my left, and Lloyd's going to elaborate on a few items he's been working on.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Is everything all right? Yes. Okay, I got a thumbs up over there. I apologize for not being present at the last community meeting, but I did send some information through Mike Isaac to get to the community. There are a few things that are under my name on this agenda. There's public safety, governance, elders care. But first and foremost, like my role as a counselor, I make sure that it doesn't interfere with my daily job. I work under education. Lorna's my director and Bobby's my manager. So my day-to-day job is I work through education at the high school. So when there's any work that comes up as a counselor, I have to be very careful of when and where am I doing it, and just so the community knows that that I'm paid through education. Okay, I don't get a salary as counsel as everybody else does. But the thing is, if I have to attend meetings, if I have to do any work for LMG, I have to do my simple request for leave of absence. I have to get it approved, so that way there's no mixing, because I can't take away from my job over there. So when we talk about public safety, my background primarily is public safety. I was a police officer for over 15 years. Many of you may know that. So I still have a lot of information, a lot of background on that. So when I came in as counsel, the first thing I did was, like, I don't have a portfolio. It's just talking directly to the director, which is Pete, and asking, is there any way, is there anything that you need? Thinking of being a council member at the highest level of government, right? Legislation. Where's our barriers? You know, we have these agreements. Are the agreements valid? Sorry. Okay. Okay. So just trying to understand, like, what the role would be regarding public safety. So I talked to Pete and I asked him. I said, well, what do you guys need? The agreements, and big help, of course, is Chief and Wendell. I mean, just the contacts alone. So, like anything else, we're trying to find where's the holds, where's the blocks, you know, because we know there's a lot of still that systemic racism, and we're not viewed as a government when we're dealing with the province and the feds. So, for instance, like for an example, our agreements, right? To start talking to them and to get us to recognize that AFNQL had made an ad hoc committee where they have two chiefs. Well, there's two positions, political positions, and then the rest are our chiefs. So for AFNQL, I'm the deputy portfolio holder for public security, but that's all throughout the province. Because I know what we need for the community, I know what we need for the police officers, but we have to go higher. So I'm able to actually deal with the ministers. I'm actually able to talk with the ministers, negotiate with the ministers, and it's not an easy job. And it's bringing up the you know, of their shortcomings with us. For instance, you know, what's going on with our officers. You know, we told them we want the officers to have basically everything that the SQ have, but more, because we deal with a lot more problems, you know, especially for training, you know. And then they go and open up a detachment up in Val-d'Or to try and fix a First Nation issue up there. But what we said was, you know, the local SQ, if we're going to talk about relations, and Pete has a little bit more information on this, is that they should be coming into our communities to talk with us, to almost like they have to get an equivalence from our First Nation leaders, what it is to work around First Nation communities. I'm not saying to come patrol the area, I'm saying they need to know what the history is with our community and understand it, because you'll have a lot of officers that are from maybe the city. Well, they don't know how things work over here. They never dealt with a First Nation person when they pulled them over. So just trying to break that down. So the bigger level is me trying to see where I can and who I can target. So let's say our agreements. We're dealing with that. Our agreements are up in a year. So are we going to talk about having a tripartite agreement, or are we going to try and look at maybe having a bilateral agreement, you know, and having the other party deal with them to try and get the money instead of us waiting 52-48. So these are a lot of things that we're thinking of and actually working on, but it's also, we just recently had them recognize that policing in First Nation is an essential service. They wanted to call us a program, and programs could be shut down, and they've shut down police agencies all over the province, you know. So just trying to get them to recognize us and say, you know, you actually need us, and tie it in all to the other aspects, you know, how we need more assistance in social and mental health and everything from there. So when I'm involved in public security, I try to direct it into to the other areas where we can still provide assistance. So for myself here, I don't have anything official with public security, but I just try and provide as much help as I can in dealing with the ministers. And we had Remy Massé, and we met with also Renee Arsenal, and they wanted to know what kind of issues they can bring before the House of Commons. So we talked about the internal threats our community is facing, and also the external threats. You guys hear about the drugs, fentanyl that's going on around here. You guys may see that a new biker chapter opened up in Bathurst that's affiliated with the Hells Angels. So that's 45 minutes away. So there's a lot of external threats that are affecting our territory. You know, so on one end, we have to deal with the governments to have them to open our eyes and see the situations that we're dealing with, and on the other hand, we got to make sure our department's okay and that everybody at home is okay. So we have to use one for the other. And what they're open to is that they want to have presentations made through all the localities, all the mayors, chief and council, everybody that's around to hear about these situations. And they wanted me to give them that information to them via email or on paper, but I basically told the MPs, I said, just give me an audience. Basically, if it has to go in front of the House of Commons, whatever it may be, I'll speak on behalf of our nation, and they're open to it. So trying to target at the higher level is what I've been doing. Elders care, oof, okay. Like everybody else, I would love to see that we had an elders care facility here. So what I did was, it was mentioned briefly at the last meeting, I threw it over there, was I just went into the band one day after work, and I asked, where's the folder? Because I know it was worked on heavily the previous administration, and so it was provided to me. And I went home and I started going through it and realized it's a huge project. It's a huge project. There was a lot of work done, but then it stopped. And Chief made some contacts with the province, and we're trying to figure out how could we get this going again. But basically, it falls under the mandate of social services and health, both directorates that could be able to work on this. So it is going to get going. Like it does need to be revamped. It does need to be updated. The government still, Quebec has to be talked to, Health Canada, but the discussions that I would like to see is when it starts getting back to the community everybody can have a vision, but what I would like to see, because of other communities I worked in, I've seen how it was, you know, almost like you would have a facility during the day where you can have the elders be there. We have full staff, we have a doctor, we have therapists, we have everything, and if they want to stay there, there's enough beds for them to stay there and live there. But let's say if the ones want to stay in their home, they want to be at home, well then maybe regarding that there can be some adjustments with our home care. So let's say instead of having certain staff work 8 to 4, well maybe there's a way that, you know, this elder wants to be with other people during the day, but wants to stay at home. But you don't want them to stay at home alone, so they would have workers for them through the night to make sure that they're there and sleeping with them. So is this something that could be along with the elders care facility, but also providing that long-term care at home, physio, you know, all these different things. So I like the way the project was, but I think it definitely could be updated. But it's big, and both directorates are gonna be working on it. So maybe upcoming there's gonna be some information sessions, but sorry. Yeah, but it's how it's gonna go from there. So I wanted it. I was hungry to take on the file, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it with my obligations at home to my job. I'm also a firefighter. I'm counselor. I just couldn't do it, but I'm able to help. So I think as my role as a counselor is to say, okay, we have both of the directorates here. You guys are going to mandate somebody to work on it, or you guys are both going to work on it. What can I do as a politician? Where are the blocks, and at which level of the government, so that way I can go there and deal with them? Where are these flags? Something like what we're doing with integrated service delivery. You know, we're working together to get ourselves on the board of directors with New Brunswick. You know, there is a we had to use Jordan's principle. So just to give you a quick example, we work at the high school, and we were working at the high school. Not now, he's here. You would have a First Nation student and a non-native student, and both of them were suicidal that day at school, and they both need emergency help. So according to New Brunswick, the non-native would get services right away and not the First Nation, because they have a Quebec Medicare and they live in Listigouche, so they don't have access to those services. So on our end, we're like, okay, where does this end? Where's the blocks, you know? Because it could be an agency that says, well, I just know it's policy. Well, then who created the policy? So what we were doing, and us as politicians, is how far up do we go, and where do we change that legislation, you know? So I think that as a role as a counselor, that's what we're doing. And then on my hat as an educator, I say, well, if that situation were to happen again at the high school, well, no, then both students are going to get the help they need. And if we have to access that mental health facility, we're going to go there and bring them there. You know, we're not going to listen to what your policy says or because they just live in Quebec. So that ISD is actually going to be tackling all the services that integrated with health. It's going to be like a circle of care, what we have here, a holistic approach for all agencies to work together, and us having a seat in New Brunswick. So these are some of the things that I'm working on, and a few other councillors are working on them. But yeah, I'll be honest, it's not what I expected to be a councillor, but I'm doing my best the way I feel a councillor should be, and trying not to mix things up. But yeah, and that's kind of where I'm right now. I won't go into anything about the drugs, because we have public security here if they want to talk about that. But as for my part, that's where I'm targeting, is the ministers and the bigger agencies, to try and get something here like a task force. And how do I get that started, while asking them, what can I help, what can I do to help here? So if you guys have any questions, please, tonight, any time, you know, I'm open. There's Sherry and Donna. Yeah. So Donna.
I just heard that the tripartite agreement with the police department is coming up for renewal. Is that this year?
2018, next year.
Next year?
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys are in works right now with renegotiating another tripart, or
Yeah.
are we looking at going outside of that again?
No, the agreements for all policing is up in 2018. So what we did was we had this committee formed last year, so that way we can get guidance from the chiefs, and we would find out what all the budgets are, the deficits and everything. So what we're doing is we're working together to figure out certain things. Well, should we be, like we vetted a consultant, and we have a consultant now that's actually working pretty hard for us. So some of the discussions are, would we be stronger as a nation to regionalize and deal with the government separately? Like, let's say if Listigouche and Guescapégué amalgamated, this would be, you know, it would be a stronger nation. So do we look at something like that? Do we look at not dealing with the feds or Quebec or whoever, and we deal with a bilateral agreement? So that way we don't have to wait for the 52% to come in later on. We'd say, you're going to give us the 100% that we're owed, and then you deal with that agency to get the other half. So there's a few things and that we're working through, but one of the things we told the consultant was, the major thing that we shouldn't have to negotiate for is our salaries, our working conditions. Everything should be at par with the province or even more, and then afterwards we can negotiate if we were to do it as nations. Like, let's say up north, they would negotiate differently from us because they have gravel roads, they're isolated and all those things. So for us on the East Coast, we would negotiate something different because, you know, we're a border community, we're a gateway for organized crime, we're not too far from the state of Maine. So these are a lot of things that we've been pushing back and forth, and dealing with the Director General of the SQ also. So when I was talking to the ministers, we said we have to get something on paper, even from the SQ, the DG, to say, you know what, we're not going to want to take over any more reserves. We're not going to want to take over their policing. You know, let's say if that police department's in bad shape, well, how do we help and facilitate that department to get back to where it needs to be? Because they can shut down a community for $600,000-$700,000. They don't want to renegotiate for their agreement, but yet they'll send the SQ in there and spend $2.4 million on that. You know, so how does that help the situation? You're just creating a problem there. So this is what we're working on, what I'm working on in this committee. But yeah, 2018 is coming up fast, but we've been working really hard on that.
And that's at the regional level, all of Quebec, right?
Yeah, regional level. That's all of Quebec.
So
yeah.
it looks good for the tripartite agreement to be renewed again for another 3-5 years?
Well, at that point right now, we don't know exactly how it's going to be, but but right now, with everything that went on with them, we're in a good position negotiating right now
Okay.
on how we want to do it.
Yeah, because I just hear talk on the street about that are with the tripartite agreement coming up due next year, that there's a possibility that it won't get renewed because of the First Nations. Other First Nations are going through this as well. A lot of the police departments are folding, and they're bringing in the other departments to replace. So that's just a big concern for us as community members. You know, are we going to lose our police department and our locally owned, our locally run?
We've
police
heard
department?
that. We've heard that as police officers yourself too. I mean, we had to deal. The thing is, we fight so much with ourselves internally, and then we have to fight with the government. So even as police officers here and dealing with back in the day, we were worried every 2 years if we were going to have a job because a new chief and council would come in. So as a police officer, now you're worried about our local government. Are they going to get rid of us? And then when it comes down to 5 years, we got to worry about, well, now is the government going to get rid of all of us? So there's always this struggle. So if we can have things set up a certain way, even without talking about the agreements, but working within the whole government, and let's say next year some of us don't come in, or all of us, or we all stay the same, at least you know, if we did our jobs right, that everything's going to continue to go up. There's nothing's going to be cleared out. There's going to be governance in place. There's going to be authorities. There's going to be all these different things. So that way everything keeps going, and it keeps building, and it keeps growing, you know? Because it was scary all those years, like almost losing a job within my community, and then hearing just the other day, March 31st, Alaqsite'w, they almost got shut down. They almost got shut down, and they had the union. There were CSST recommendations that because of the officers that got killed there has to be 2 patrolmen in the car. They didn't even have enough to man 1. And the government still doesn't see that, you know? So this is what we're really fighting for. So we want to make that base negotiation that we're never even going to have to bargain for that. It's going to be extra. So right now, I think we're in a strong position to fight back with them, and I don't see any police department, hopefully no department shutting down anymore. So, you know, when we went to them, we said, okay, let's say if you're going to shut down our police department, do you think the SQ are going to come and patrol this community? Guarantee it won't happen. Guarantee you. So I said, there's no way. So we're not going anywhere. We want to build it. We want to, you know, First Nations, we don't have borders. You know, like why can't, in the near future, why can't we build, like if our home's taken care of, well, we're federally recognized. You know, we're recognized through the feds, we're recognized through the province. So who's to say that, let's say in 10, 20 years, our department's maybe built and growing? Well, RCMP are contracted in Campbellton, so why couldn't we work there? You know, why couldn't we take over that community? You know, our officers are already sworn in as special constables. You know, Cross Point, we have a great relationship with the community, and our department's building, so later on, we'll take that over. You know, and maybe if we were regionalized with Guescapega, we kind of close that gap. And it's also asserting our jurisdiction, our territory, and that if we have this whole area, you know, why do we have to stay in this box? So.
My other question is for the staffing. More and more we're seeing people not from our community, our own police officers, and there's a lot of talk of that. And a lot of mentality is these are police officers coming from the Quebec areas, so they're looked at as the SQ kind of people, and that doesn't sit well with a lot of the community members. So what is the plan for the next tripartite agreement? Is it you're going to be continuing with the getting our own people in there?
I'm going to let Pete answer that, but I'll just give a little quick part for me. Like the officers that you see here, they're non-natives. It's because we don't have enough First Nations here, right? And as you may see in the publications, that they're doing a blitz. They want to get out. They want to recruit. They want more of our own people here. We're looking at hiring 5 new officers, but we want First Nations, right? Like anywhere else, we don't want to keep outsourcing. But if we don't outsource right now, you know, we have officers that are burned. They're 33 hours. How do we triage these situations? So, you know, but that's, like, I could give that part, but to be more detailed, Pete's right back there if he wants to answer that about the officers in 2018. Pass the mic.
Okay, Donna. one of the reasons that we do have non-recognizable faces serving the community these days is that, like, as Lloyd mentioned earlier, we just don't have the resource of qualified Native police officers that fit the industry standard according to the tripartite agreement. So when we look at the tripartite agreement, it provides the description of what is to be expected in regards to training and qualifications. So in order for us to continue to operate as a police department under the tripartite agreement, we have to bring in other people if there's none that are available here. So we bring them in on a temporary basis, and they serve with us. However, at this time, as Lloyd mentioned earlier, we are in the process. The chief police and I, we had many discussions in regards to how we're going to go about our recruitment program to bring in as many local
local Mi'kmaq First Nation candidates from Listigich will be given all priority for any training opportunities that arise. So like Lloyd mentioned, 5 candidates for training. If we can accumulate 5 people from the community of Listigich First Nation that meet the criteria throughout the selection process, fine and dandy. But right now, like I said, we're just faced with that dilemma of, being short with the amount of resources that we have available to us to accommodate those positions. And to this day, we're still short. We're working with a skeleton crew that's putting in the amount of hours more than what's expected of them. But we still commit ourselves to the service of the community to keep it running, to keep it safe, so there's no other problems, that we have, like we see in the media, major problems. It's our commitment is to our dedication to this community is without a doubt, without question, going to be there 24/7, 365. So, if it takes working additional hours, covering shifts, we'll do it. We'll do it without question, without hesitation. So, and we have been doing it for quite a few years now. But with the accumulation of more candidates, more police officers, we can alleviate that problem and just improve our service to the community to make it better than what it is right now. So we had been asked to present a quick presentation, just the updated status of what's going on regarding drugs in the community. With that, I'm going to pass it off to my investigator, Detective Sergeant Eric Swasson. He can answer a few questions and provide a little insight as to what's going on within the LPD concerning that topic.
Just real quick before you start, Lorna
I just want to add a little bit more information with regard to the policing file. We had Pete and Trapper do a presentation at Chief and Council, I want to say about a month or so ago. And it was made very clear to us that the current funding agreement does not provide enough funds for staffing. And one of the biggest issues that we have is recruitment and retention of officers, because we can't pay the scales that are out there within Quebec and RCMP and so forth. But if you remember earlier in the conversation we had with open source revenue, John had presented last fiscal years and what we decided, and we told Pete to work on and Trapper to work on, is a budget for the current fiscal year. If we have to tap into own source revenue, let's do it, because we can't hold officers, we don't have enough officers, we can't retain them, then it puts the safety of our community at risk. So the key is for us to be able to invest enough money right now and not wait for the next agreement, not wait and hope for the next agreement that there is going to be enough money, and stop putting our community at risk. So all we're waiting for right now is that budget to come up to Chief and Council so we can review that.
I'll just provide a little bit of context to the request here as well. One of the things that was brought to my attention is that a lot of other communities, because of the I guess, influx of heavier drugs that we're seeing in communities, not just this community, but other communities as well, that are having, serious consequences, including death. You saw some OICs, you saw some stances from different councils and chiefs and councils taking stance on drugs, and drug trafficking in the community and things like that. So, not to say that we're ignoring that completely, but I think it's good that we get the information that we need, we find out what's going on in our community, and then some of the steps that we as chief and council can take, and some of the steps that our officers are taking. So that's why I asked our public safety, public security to come here and present tonight and speak to some of the issues that are going on. Again, you can only elaborate or reveal, so much, but again, to give us an idea of what we're dealing with and what we can do as a community going forward. Sorry, over to you, Eric. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off or cut into your time.
Is it on? Yes. Good evening. I was not very prepared for this tonight, but I'll improvise, I guess. It's not on? It is on. There you go. So good evening. Like I said, I was not prepared tonight for this meeting. Pete had called me this afternoon. I wasn't going to court, so I turned around and came back to meet with you guys. As far as drug within the community, of course, we have drug issues within our community. We work a lot on these issues. A lot of stuff happened behind scenes that you guys don't see, that we deal with. Of course, a lot of outside the community, there's a lot of traffickers are from the outside, Bathurst area, like Lloyd mentioned, the Moncton area, New Brunswick, of course, and the Quebec side, Montreal. We do our best to work with different agencies to reduce the drug trafficking within the community, and like we mentioned, we're short-staffed right now. We do as much as we can to help out, but our force is you guys. Without you guys, we can't do our job properly. So we need the information from the public as well. So that's a message I send to the community. If you want to work, if you have information on drugs, drug abusing or drug trafficking, you're more than welcome to come at the office, meet with us. Any officers, the one you trust, come see us, and we'll do what we have to do. If there's any questions, I'm open to not specific questions, but questions about drugs within the community or comments. Just before the question, I just want to point out that we had during the summer, we had some situation that happened, that we had some death within the community with fentanyl, and the gang members with the rock machine that were established in town were arrested last October. So that matter was solved already. So shoot, this one.
Okay, so my name is Carolyn, and I've been a community member for almost 40 years now. And as I understand, as a young girl, marijuana was the gateway drug, right? I'm sure everybody's familiar with marijuana. My question is, as it being a gateway drug, why is our community putting so much money into a marijuana facility? And I know that it's being said it's going to be used for medicinal purposes, but we all know that people use it to get high. That's my main concern right now. And I have used in past years, I've cleaned my act up, and I've seen debts on the reserve. I know people who do a lot of drugs. And it's really sad to see it. So that's my question. Why would the community put their money, so much money, into a facility for marijuana create a program for it to teach our people about it, yet it's a gateway drug, and it brings other drugs to us.
I understand your question, but that's beyond my, I would say my qualification, and it's something I want to answer that instead of.
Okay, so you'd like more information on the Zenobus investment? Yeah, okay. Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. I can understand and appreciate your conflict, I do. And you know, it's not a right or wrong answer to any of that. Personally, I struggle with my own view on medicinal marijuana, recreational marijuana use as well. But we also have an issue where I don't necessarily agree that marijuana is a gateway drug. Okay, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it has more to do with how we and this is going back to my background, I guess, is more a question of how we deal with the issues that are going on that we have, right? So if we can find healthier ways of dealing with an issue, then I think that that's a good move. I would say right now we have a number of people, not just in our community, but in general, that medicate in other ways that are much more dangerous and serious than marijuana. So like I said, admittedly, I do struggle with my own view, but I can see it as more of a harm reduction strategy than, say, a gateway. I'll go back to some of the work I did with youth years ago, and where you know, there was a 15-year-old who was getting off of heroin and was using marijuana to help with that. So now I'm not happy about a 15-year-old using marijuana, but I'm more okay with that than somebody using heroin, as an example, right? So it's a struggle. Mentally, it's a struggle, and trying to understand it. But there is a medicinal side to this. Medicinal marijuana isn't just about the high, or isn't necessarily about the high. There are variations or strains of it that are that do not get you high. There's no euphoric effect. It would be for pain or mobility, could help with dizziness or things like that. There's some other areas besides the euphoric effect. What's that? Arthritis, epilepsy. There are some. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep, and that's another thing. I mean, the other side of it too is that struggle aside, it is an investment. It is a business opportunity or an investment opportunity that has some potential to it. And at the time of making the investment, we felt that it was a wise move, a carefully considered move to put that money in at that time and to see what kind of opportunities would come out of it. Right. Yes. Should. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, I don't know if you want to put that back over the mic. Did everybody hear it? Basically, it was with regards to the amount of employment that we've seen at Zenabis to date, and admittedly, it leaves us wanting much more. I would say, as a community, as leadership, yes, we would like to see much more from that investment, and I agree. So, in the agreement, I have to be mindful of what we can share or not, because in the agreement it does stipulate sort of certain communication restrictions, and that's standard of any business contract. But we did not see any need for a max or a minimum number in terms of employment. Rather, looking at, let's get our people qualified who want to go work there, and let's get our people trained and to go work there. So that's where, nothing can be guaranteed, Summer. I mean, and no matter what training you have, right? But it is about going out and getting the training. So myself as a trained therapist, there's no guarantee I can be a therapist, right? I still have to go and do a good job. I still have to do well in my day-to-day and apply and try to get it going. So that's where our focus has been, is getting our people trained, getting our people into a program. We ran a cohort of 14 people, I believe it was, Lorna, 14 people that took the Kwantlen College training that was recommended to us by Zenabis. Since then, we've, I would say, I'm saying we, but it's more LMDC that has taken on the initiative to look at other options, and I would say options that are more fitting to provide those job opportunities. So right now we have some discussion shaping up to start a horticulture program in the community that would allow our community members who take that program to not only work in that facility or that industry, but become gardeners, work in a greenhouse, work, in a number of different areas, as well as, say, at the Zenabis plant. So we are looking at creating the opportunities for our people to take advantage of that facility being right across the bridge from us. And I would say in the discussions going forward, yes, we will be talking about the need to get our people working there. They absolutely need to. I don't know who's next. And, okay. Oh, got a mic back there, so, okay. Karen? Yeah.
I agree with the Zenabis program, and I agree because it doesn't have the THC in it, so you can't get medical marijuana. Is that my understanding? Is that true? That you can't get high on the medical marijuana, and it's for medical purposes only, for such thing as pain and things like that? And I do agree with Carolyn over there that marijuana is a gateway drug. The reserve right here, right now, if you look around, open your eyes and look at the people who are addicted right now, all started off with pot. Look where they are now. I'm an addictions counselor by trade. I took training in my field. I understand about drugs. I studied it. I've watched people. So, and I've also worked at the treatment center. So we've seen a lot of people come and go. There is a major, major drug problem in Listuguj, and as far as I'm concerned, a lot of people in Listuguj are in denial. Your children, your grandchildren, they're all at risk. The school is here. There's a pusher just down the road, just a few houses away from here. And you're talking about Zenabis. Yeah, they're going to need Zenabis after they go through the opioid shit. They're going to need more than that. It kills people. And I'm going to tell you one example of this girl who died just last summer. I witnessed when her brother, her twin brother, was searching her pants, reached in her jeans that she had on when they found her dead. And I was there when he was looking through her pants, and he pulled out a blue pill. And this blue pill is a Percocet laced with fentanyl. And this is what killed this woman, and she was only young. She didn't have to die. She didn't deserve to die. But this is what's going on. This is what's going around in our community. Nobody wants to. You mentioned a drug problem here, everybody wants to look the other way, and I'd like to know why. You have children, you have grandchildren. You know, I'm worried about my grandchildren. You know, I have kids who are addicted because nothing's been done here in this beautiful reserve, our beautiful home. You have children walking around who are doing drugs right now and smoking pot, and that's okay? I beg to differ, it's not okay. It is a gateway drug. When it stops working, when the tolerance level reaches its level, they're gonna go on to something else that is stronger to feel the effect, which is drugs, more drugs. You know, and I'm tired of looking at my people dying left and right. And I'm just one person. I'd like to help. I'd love to save this community, but I can't. I don't have the backup of anyone else that wants to. We don't even have a treatment center. We don't even have a healing lodge here. You know, there's drinking problems. People have drinking problems. They're in denial. There's a drug addiction going on. People don't want to acknowledge it. Leave it to the addictions counselors to fix it. You can't fix that problem. You can't help your people. Yeah, you can build them homes. You can do all kinds of fancy things. You can build a cannabis plant. You can build an old age home. Well, why aren't you looking at the drug problem here? You're going to wait till someone else passes away? And there's worse shit that's coming, stronger than fentanyl, that's on its way. And the targets are the youth in this school. Those are the main targets. Exactly. And it is a gateway drug. I don't care what Senator says or what anybody else says. I studied addictions. And I've seen a lot of people die from drugs. And they all started off with smoking pot. Being young and foolish, and as a recreation drug, and maybe once in a while, party drug, led to other drugs, which killed a lot of people. And you all know the people that have already passed away on the res that didn't have to pass so young. 40s, 50s. Some of them didn't even reach 50. So if you're not worried about your children, you should be. And if you're not worried about your grandkids, you should be. Because they're the next targets until something is done. And I'd like to know if there's anything being done in this community. I know we're short-staffed with police. I know they have their own problems going on. And I know it's a big task to take on, but something has to be done. You got to get some awareness out there. You have to teach the children. You got to educate the children about what's coming and what's going on. And, you know, I'm just a concerned member because I have grandkids. I got almost 7 grandkids. And I'm scared to death. I'm worried. And maybe you guys should be too. Because it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It doesn't matter if you're black or white. Drugs don't discriminate. It can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter if you raised in a good home. All that money, fancy things you have, that doesn't matter. If a child falls prey to drugs, you've lost them. You've lost them. You can't get them back. And you better stop it before it happens. It might be your son, it might be your child, it might be your granddaughter's next. And I'm just worried. And I'm sure everybody else in the community who have children are worried about that. It's a big problem. Big, big problem. Open your eyes and see the big picture and start doing something before it attacks your own. So I'd like to know if there's anything being done.
Just to let you know. Hello? Yes, we are. We're working on it all the time. You know, it's not like that none of us haven't been affected by drugs or anything like that. The message is pushed on him. The message is pushed on him to get rid of it. Find a way. And we do. And it's just not a community thing. This is a global epidemic. Global. It's here. It's across the street, it's across the river, it's across the pond, into Europe, Africa, everywhere. It's not just here. We try to take care of ourselves here as best as we can. And also, we need community support from you guys as well.
That's point well taken. The other part I really want to share is I appreciated all the very open and frank discussion that you guys had, the points that you expressed with such emotion. It's really good to hear. And as we were talking here, we're saying, you know what, I think we need a workshop or a healing session specific to some drugs, and we need to talk about that. We need to get that out. We need to give people a chance to voice their concern and as Wendell was saying, develop a strategy and approach. And Rose, I'm not trying to ignore you or anything. I'm just trying to make sure I get all my thoughts out before I pass it over to you. But I think that's what I'm hearing right now is we need to heal. We need to learn to get past some things, talk about some things, get over some things, treat each other better, treat ourselves better, and recognize ourselves for the strength that we have as a nation and start celebrating that rather than focusing on what we don't have or what we might have lost and build up that strength and resilience in us.
Grandmother in this community for the last 23 years. I've been alcohol and drug free. I learned from my own experiences of what worked for me and what didn't work. And one of the things that didn't work was the use of pills, because one pill leads up to another. Somewhere along the way, I discovered Native spirituality, and this is what I'm trying to get across to you. I need a sweat lodge. I need a teepee. I need access to wood. I need access to traditional medicines. There are people out there that are crying, that want to go along this path and get some healing, even just to talk, for Christ's sakes. We have people out there, especially the young people. I'm willing. My sister and I are willing. Teresa's willing. All the ones that follow this path. This week we're going out on a fast just because of this bullshit. Something has to be done. I'm going on 65 years old. I'm fasting for my people, for Christ's sakes. Something needs to be done. How many other people are going to die? I want a sweat lodge like yesterday. I want that teepee out there. I want that wood. I have medicines. I'm willing to lead. I need people to guide me. I need people there to help me.
What I'm trying to say is you can take the drugs out of the community, but what about the ones who are sick right now? What do we do for them? A lot of times they don't like to go to a treatment center where it's too close by or it's too far or they don't want to leave their children or you know what I mean? There's always an excuse. I know the denial is strong and it's just these people can't help themselves. They're so deep into their addiction and the addiction is so powerful. As you might know, you might have family members that you've talked to and, you can't get through to them. And I know that for a fact, So it's not that they don't want help. It's that they don't know where to go to get the help because they think that nobody cares, and the drugs just keep coming in and they just keep using because for them, that's their answer to their reality. And there's no place to go. There's no one to go talk to. We don't even have a healing lodge. And if we did have a healing lodge, we could invite these people to come in. We could start working with them because like I said, I'm trained in that field. Roseanne has a lot of experience in the healing journey that she learned through the years in her sobriety. And Teresa, with her teachings, we could do a lot for this community. Just us three alone. And we could add nurses, we could add more people into this center to try and save our people. Because if you don't do it now, I'm sorry to say that none of your children or grandchildren they're not safe. Maybe 1 out of 10 might be lucky. The rest of them are going down. Because if you don't deal with the drug issue now, it's going to get 10 times worse. And you can look the other way all you want, but your children are not safe and your grandchildren are not safe either. And you should really, really consider that. Because I'm worried about my grandkids. I'm going to be there to try to help them as much as I can to keep them away from the drug. But you can't keep them away from peer pressure. And children are very vulnerable. You know what I mean? And so here in this community, I believe we need to heal our people. And it's not just taking away the drugs, because they can go outside and get them. They'll just go to Campbellton, get their drugs. We need to do some healing in this community. You need to educate the children like big time. I don't care if you do it in the schools, group homes, wherever, whatever, but you need to educate your children. And this is, believe you me, if you don't, you're going to regret it. You know, I tried that with my children. I did educate them on drugs from what I know. You know, and I did my best. So if you don't start fighting now, you're going to see more people dying here. And more young people getting into the drug scene. And the police can't all do it alone. The whole community has to get together and work on this. There's departments also, like social services, medical, chief and council. We have to do everything in our power to try and save our children. Because if you don't, I guarantee you, one of you might be going to your own children's funeral. Because there's worse shit coming in than fentanyl, and it's already out there. And when it reaches here, someone is bound to die. And how many more do we have to lose before you people sit there and worry about cannabis and this and this and this, the material stuff that should, you know, sustain our community? What about the problem with the drugs? Don't you want to save your children? Don't you want to do something big for them? Yeah, it's nice to have recreation. It's nice to have all these things. And we appreciate that. We do. You do a great job there, Shiela, for our children. But it's not enough. Like I said, they're praised. They're the first ones that'll get attacked. And it all starts out with a little joint. So we need something big here. We need a treatment center, or we need at least a healing lodge to start healing our people, because addictions is it's hard to beat without proper treatment. And our people need treatment. And I can tell you, half of this community is on drugs. I see it every day when I walk down the street. I see the damage it's doing to the people. They don't even have any life in them anymore. You see that too, I'm sure you do. Stop looking the other way. Start helping your people. We're supposed to be a proud Mi'kmaq community. Let's make it that way. So if you got anything to work on, you know, start working on that. How are we going to heal our people? And how are we going to stop our children from getting into drugs? If you love your children, and I'm sure you all do, and we all do. Everybody loves their children. Even the drug addicts love their children. But like I said, they're addicted and they're sick. It's a sickness. It's a very powerful addiction. You can't just say stop using and they're going to stop. They can't. They need help. And the detox is always full. There's always a waiting list. By the time their name comes up, they could be dead. So we need something here for our own people here. You do the work, we'll do the work. I have certificates as a addictions counselor. I've worked in that field. I've worked in the treatment center. I know what it's all about. I've been clean myself, be 24 years, June 5th. And I'm proud of myself. I'm not ashamed. And I'm glad that I was able to see in my eyes that I had a problem. And it wasn't necessarily with drugs. It was more alcohol than anything else. But I had to become honest with myself and notice that I had a problem. And I didn't drink every day, and I was no closet drinker. I was just a weekender. And still became a problem. And Chris, you sit there and you know, and you've been sober a long time, and you should be trying, doing your best to start working on issues that this community, especially with the drug problem, to bring something in here to heal our people. Because there's a lot of healing that needs to be done here. Let me tell you, a lot. I've been on my healing journey for going on almost 24 years, and I'm not done healing yet. You know, I'm not done. I'm not recovered. But I'm better than I was 24 years ago. Much better. So, you know, I urge you, Council, chief and council to at least take that into consideration. And when you go home tonight, think about your kids and your grandchildren. If you don't have grandchildren now, you will. They will come. And you have to worry about them, because if nobody else cares, if nobody else wants to do anything about it, you're going to lose them.
As somebody spoke about, the dog, that sniffed out drugs, that was an excellent program. For whatever reason, it was discontinued. Is there any possibilities of using the own source dollars, is that what it is, to pay for this service again, bringing the service dog in? Because it did make a big difference in the school, and it made a difference in the community.
So if I go back to John, Lorna, and I think even Pete and Trapper and Eric spoke about it before, is it something that we could support through own source revenues, through our own community dollars that we generate? It is something. There is a process. So far, the police have submitted an operational plan and budget for this upcoming year. I don't know if it included a K-9, but definitely it looked at some recruitment, getting some officers in, and building up the force. And I think you do have probably a long-term plan, right? I don't want to speak for you guys, but a long-term plan of K-9 and probably growing investigators, growing specialized services, and things like that. Yeah.
I was going to speak to you there intimately, Gail. Once we're able to beef up our numbers in regards to members of the LPD, and from there on we could start branching out and assigning and designing that service for the community. And once we're strong enough in regards to manpower, and yes, most definitely, Chief of Police is going to definitely push for that. That will be an interesting conversation the Chief of Police and I will have tomorrow morning, or maybe even parts of tonight. And we'll see if we can possibly expedite that process.
You have support right there, so.
Yes, absolutely, and very thankful for support of council.
We actually have the report back from when Henry was still doing that, and when the K-9 was removed, he actually submitted a detailed description of what exactly it cost and the training. From what I understand, when he went through the second training for the second dog, it was through the SQ, and that training, I believe, was covered by them, because they get so many funding dollars a year for First Nations. So that training was taken care of. I think the only thing we had to provide was, let's say, any incidentals, or we had to purchase the dog and things like that. But when he was trained and recognized, he was basically qualified the same as a provincial officer through the SQ. So let's say if an emergency happened out of town, like let's say if it was in a neighboring community, well, the SQ would have to, if they don't have a dog coming from Quebec City or Montreal, Henry was actually trained to go everywhere. He was trained by the ERT team. I mean, he had his dog in the helicopters and all kinds of stuff. It was great prevention, like Trapper said, a huge deterrent to this community. I was on the road back then when we had the K-9, and we would just, it was so hard to deal with drugs here. I mean, they would go out of the community. Right now, the government shut down the intelligence units in New Brunswick, where we had to talk to the ministers. Like all these essential services and all these intel groups and all these bigger things, when the government shuts them down due to human resources and Ottawa makes these decisions, we hurt here, because we're all feeling that. Even the RCMP in New Brunswick, they're stretched thin. The SQ just changed their structure, their organizational structure. They're stretched thin. So that's where, as us chief and council leaders, have to go to the government and have to go to our MPs and tell them that, these changes that Ottawa makes, it just affects everybody around here. So how can we now spread information to the other agencies of what's going on? Because there may be people from here that are bringing the drugs to other communities, which we've seen online, but then we have another big things that are coming through our community. So trying to get a task force here is one of my main goals, and trying to get training here, because when I was in Montreal with the RCMP, they wanted us. It was great on paper being a First Nation officer because for them it got the budgets, but it turns into a recruiting, you know. They trained me, they gave me everything I needed, and afterwards they said, why don't you come work for us, come work for the RCMP. So they do that around the province of Quebec, and I don't agree with the recruitment process because then our officers are so strained, but it looks good to the officer that they want to go out and they want to get extra training, they want to see all these different things, but we got to find a way to actually have that here so we don't have to keep outsourcing. So we want to be the central hub here of training, of battling organized crime, of prevention, talking about, you know, just connecting everything with mental health and addictions, and noticing, you know, that diagnoses are done the right way, and all these different things. We could go on and on and on about it, but it all has to be connected, you know, like a circle of care type approach or holistic approach. But you know, as long as we're doing enforcement, we always have to focus on prevention also, because not every drug user is a criminal. It may have happened with an injury, and it just so happened that, you know, they got dependent on these drugs, and it's not their problem. But you know, the big pharmacies, they don't care about that. You know, they keep pushing it. So now we're looking at ways of how do we help the person, you know, even arresting the person over and over again, maybe for thefts, and it's to feed a habit. Well, you know what? At some point we have to say, why does this person have that habit? You know, what kind of issues does that person have? Mental health issues or addictions, or maybe there's some kind of trauma growing up. So we do need a lot more services here. Like Karen was saying, we do need, you know, we need these facilities. We need people within our community that can provide help to these people. They don't have to have a master's or letters after their name, you know, because we have community members that have the experience and have the knowledge that are traditional, and then we have to find some way that we can marry both together, where we can tell the province, you know, we need all this for fun, we need prevention, we need all this stuff, but we also need it tailored to our community. You know, we don't have to run by Montreal's guidelines because they're a city. We're a lot different. We know how to treat our people, we know, but we just need the tools, we need the access, we need the funding, and that way we can, you know, tailor make it to what we have here. So everybody has to be involved. Like you said, we need elders, we need traditional, we need young kids that are right out of university with a degree, all around. So if we could start building it here, so that way we don't have to worry about a waiting list to go into Miramichi to get their methadone or this and that, or, you know, everything has to be within the community. It's almost like we have to be the central hub and kind of have everything surrounded on them, because they say, you know, if you remove you don't want a person to be like, well, you know what, you got to get rid of your friends if you're going to be on drugs. Well, that person doesn't want to leave their community. If they leave their community, you know, the problem is still here. So how do we fix everything together? So that'll be part of the task force and everything else we could put together. But there's models everywhere. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to know the right people to talk to, lobby, and get our stakeholders, and really go after the government on that. And I think from there we could definitely build within our community, you know. It's my 2 cents on it, and you know.
So we are running a little late here, and apologize for that. But I think it was good discussions. There's just a few items left that that I wanted to talk about and just give you. It's not stuff that, not items that. See you, Chris. Not items that we're going to talk about tonight, but things to expect coming up. And things that we've talked about in the past. So one of them was the moose hunting. We had brought that up at our first community meeting, but we have not yet had a chance to talk about moose hunting. And I don't think it's necessarily just moose hunting, but hunting in general. The concern that's come forward to council, and I think the community shares it, is hunting practices, over-hunting, people from outside our area coming into our area and hunting. And it's a long and ongoing practice, I'm told. There's people that have been doing this for 20 years, you know, and they feel that they have a certain right to our territory, that they can come and do this without permission, as long as they're with a friend or with whatever. I think we need to, as a community, talk about whether we think that's okay or not. Personally, I don't think that's okay. I think there needs to be some protocols in place that we need to determine what our own hunting laws are for our community. I think we need to do that. Tonight's not the night that we're going to do that, though. Okay, so don't worry. But that's a conversation we need to get into down the road. Another thing I was asked to update you on is the Hydro-Quebec. We have posted for the liaison position. Somebody that can help out our community members should they want to make arrangements. You would probably be surprised to know that we have not had any applicants to date. And, yeah. I can't tell you that offhand. Apply and maybe you'll find out. Yeah. And the last thing is, we talked about it in the beginning as council. We talked about prioritizing election code as something that should be talked about as community. We talked about it here at the community in our last meeting. We talked about the need for updating an election code. Wendell had spoke about two different options, going the option of the First Nations Election Act or going into a custom. We have some people lined up that are going to come and elaborate on those two options and talk about that with the community. So these are some things that you can look forward to, and I'll expect your applications for that liaison position. But I just sort of in closing, I just want to thank everybody for sticking through tonight. It was really cold up here. I don't know if you guys were freezing there, but we're all in this together. And I just want to thank you guys. If council, you have anything to add, by all means. MRP, the MRP. Fred Isaac is working on the land management regime. So that's sort of a bigger picture item. So it's all of lands. And right now the MRP conversation will go inside that land management regime conversation. So it's one part of the lands. So it's not just about MRP, but it's how do we want to manage all of our land, right? That's what we want to get to, unless of course that's what we as a community decide we want our rules to be, right? Are we good, everyone? You guys are good? Alrighty. Thank you very much, IT guys, and for all your help in broadcasting this and making us look good. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.